r/AskReddit. What is the biggest "this relationship won't last" red flag you've ever seen at a wedding? By Pixels. The father of the bride made a speech about how he saw his daughter organizing the groom over time. Basically, instead of telling a story of their burgeoning love, it was a tale of how she began to control him over time. Was cringy. Lasted 3 years. The groom spent almost the entire wedding glued to his female work colleague, to the point that the bride had to drag him away for their first dance. They also kept going off somewhere together. A friend tried to follow them outside, but it was too dark to locate them. You could see the obvious hurt on the bride's face throughout the day. Prior to the wedding, he'd taken his colleague away abroad for his stag do, just the two of them, despite the bride's protests, and in his wedding speech he pointed his colleague out and told her that he'd had the best time of his life that weekend. They are still together at the moment, but I don't see it being the happy ending that the bride was so desperate for. At my brother's first wedding, his fiancée's dad came into the room we were using to get ready and told my brother that if he wanted to leave, that he would take care of all the people inside and he wouldn't even be mad. My brother did it anyway. Divorced 4 months later. The other day a co-worker told me about a wedding she was just in the bridal party for. The groom and his mother were counting out how much each family gave as a cash gift, and giving the bride grief because her family weren't able to give as much as the groom's family. I feel like that's an insanely bad way to start a marriage. My cousin's wedding. He was in the army. His bride was 6 months pregnant, a senior in high school, and she had just turned 18 the previous day. Her grandfather was the officiant and he gave a big speech about how marriage was only between one man and one woman and no one can tear apart what God puts together. They opened their gifts in front of everyone like it was a birthday party. There was no alcohol, dancing, or food. Within 30 to 40 minutes after the gift opening, the happy couple peeled out of the Boy Scout lodge, doing donuts while her teenage friends cheered them on. They spent the night at the hotel everyone was staying at, separately, which consisted of him getting shit-faced with his friends while she was alone in their room. In front of our entire family, my sister said I give them a year. She was wrong though. Within 3 months of the kid coming, they had split and my cousin swears the kid isn't his. The whole wedding was one giant ducking red flag. Bride told me and my partner a few weeks earlier that she didn't want to go through with it. She had generic vows. Husbands were beautiful. She had a sour face the whole time. It was almost funny. It ended up turning out that she was shagging my partner the last year and she left her husband for him 4 months in. I dodged a bullet. Groom was clearly having a good time. Bride was visibly uncomfortable. When it came time for vows, the groom had a long list and read it off nicely. The bride said something along the lines of, "I'm just gonna wing it, basically you're my best friend," and trailed off soon after. Thank God for the open bar. I've posted about this before. It was my wedding. The groom stopped the entire ceremony, which was held at our place, so he could watch The Simpsons. There was no discussion about this beforehand. He just did it. No, we are not still married. Shocking, I know. Groom was making out with a bridesmaid while his new bride proceeded to get blackout drunk and cry in the corner. After the ceremony, the bride, who had epilepsy, had a seizure and her family took her into a side room away from all the guests to look after her until she'd recovered. The groom didn't bother to go and help look after his wife. He was too busy getting drunk and partying with all his mates. Even after the bride recovered enough to return to the celebrations, he didn't stay with her or comfort her and she sat there in tears for half the night. It lasted a couple of years before they divorced due to his selfishness and alcohol problem. Went to a wedding for one of my older, male, cousins who has 2 sisters about my age. Apparently the bride talked to the oldest sister, whom the groom was very close to, and said something like, "Just so you know, you're not the most important girl in his life anymore. I am. Can't wait to see how this one plays out." The groom refused to get dressed and wore a black t-shirt and sneakers. The bride looked incredible in her gown and he looked like he was popping to the shops for a pack of ciggies. At the reception there is a local tradition for the groomsmen to steal the bride. Basically they do a quick bar hop and come back to continue the reception. My husband was a groomsman, and as more than an hour passed, I finally called him. He said she was having a blast and wouldn't leave. The groom had arrived back after about 30 minutes, laughed it off at first, then relief when she finally blew back and totally smashed. They made it about 2 months after that. The groom was madly in love with his fiancée, as one would hope, always got the vibe she just wasn't that into it. During the wedding he was so nervous he stuttered. Bride rolled her eyes and looked pissed. Then later in the night after dinner and music had started, the bride got annoyed people weren't staying in their allocated seats. They had a wishing well for presents. We added our anonymous gift with the card and thought that was that. 1 week later get an abusive call that we did not put in. This ended up getting so bad it tore down multiple friendships for the groom. Bride wanted enough money to buy a house. Turns out bride was cheating on him the whole time, with someone who was also married. I saw the newly married couple step out of an elevator, and he accidentally stepped on her dress. She snapped and turned around, yelling, "Do that again and see what happens." He was stone-faced and without saying anything, immediately went to the bar for a beer. Attended a wedding where the bride talked, not about her love for him or how great he is, but more about how he changed so much of his personality for her and how that made everything perfect. I'm so glad I met this 150 pounds of clay. I was able to mold him into the exact form I wanted, then fire him in a kiln and marry him. Have you seen any big red flags at a wedding? Post it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.